is the election of the Speaker of the House. The floor is open for nominations. Representative Emerson, why do you rise?
I have a nomination.
Step to the podium, please.
I forgot where the button was to lower it there. Okay. Mr. Acting Speaker, fellow members, families, and friends, over the last several months, we've endured what I would call probably the toughest thing we do in our tenure as representatives, decide on our next leader. This particular vote is difficult because it inevitably becomes personal, and despite what you might read on the news or social media, we do respect and care for each other here. Every person who put their name out there is brave and courageous, and I respect and applaud all of them. It's really hard to ask a group of your friends to be their leader because it hurts if they don't support you. So to everyone who offered yourself for this role, thank you for putting yourself out there for this race. It's now time to decide our next leader. Mr. Acting Speaker, I'm here today to nominate Representative Sherman Mack of Albany for the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives. A longtime resident of Livingston Parish, he graduated from Holden High School and then Southeastern. He graduated from law school in 1999, and after a year-long clerkship, opened his law practice in Albany. Sherman was first elected to the House in 2011. In his second term, he served as chairman of the Committee on Criminal Justice. It was a particularly busy term for the Criminal Justice Committee as the governor focused on reforming our criminal justice system. I know from a personal standpoint that anytime I had a question regarding a bill coming out of Chairman Mack's committee, he always had a thoughtful answer that convinced me that he had carefully considered the legislation, even if I disagreed with his stance. He and his wife, Angie, reside in Livingston Parish with their 3 children. He's a member, deacon, and Sunday school teacher of Bethlehem Baptist Church. He also coaches youth basketball. Members, we're about to cast our first vote of this legislative term, and we're voting for the person that we believe will lead us through the successes, the failures, the rough patches, and the celebrations over the next 4 years. Sherman Mack has spent countless hours and no doubt put lots of miles on his vehicle, traveling across our state, meeting with each of us to understand our motivations, our desires, and our hopes for Louisiana. He puts in the time to listen to us and consider what we deem to be important for our areas. The Bible tells us in Philippians 2, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. Leadership isn't about centralizing power with one person. Leadership is about empowering the people around you to realize their potential to be great. I believe Sherman has listened to the membership of this body. I believe he understands the unique capabilities of everyone here and how to set this chamber and the state up for success. It's easy to get caught up in our own internal conflicts, but the people of Louisiana didn't send us here for that. They elected us to be strong, make good decisions, and represent them. Abraham Lincoln told us that a house divided against itself cannot stand. We've all spent a considerable amount of time pondering this decision and working to get commitments all across the state. But now it's time to choose a path and unite behind one leader. Mr. Acting Speaker, I'm very proud to stand here today and nominate Representative Sherman Mack to be our next speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Bishop, why do you rise? Please take the podium.
Good morning. I stand here humbled as a member of the Louisiana House of Representatives. I'm only one member out of 105. I'd like to recognize my 2 boys, Trey and Cooper. They've grown up in this building. They were extremely young when I got elected 8 years ago. And I taught them all their lives to understand the rules of loyalty, integrity, and keeping and standing by your word. And those are the issues I'm talking about today. These brass rails surround us are 187 feet long. There are 105 people that sit inside of these brass rails. They're the only ones allowed inside the railing. You've worked hard to vote inside of this 187 feet of brass rails. There should be no outside influence in the decisions made to manage this body, our body. Only the 105 members in this room should decide what happens inside these brass rails. 4 years ago, we created history by becoming an independent body and an independent institution, independent of all outside influences. That had not happened in modern times as far as we know. I hope that we stand strong as a body, as an institution, as the House of Representatives, and will not return independence to outside influences. I believe in this body. I know the man I'm about to nominate believes in the same values and independence that I do. Over the past 8 years, he's served as District of the State of Louisiana well as a conservative Republican. He has continuously demonstrated his commitment to the House of Representatives and to the state of Louisiana. It is my honor to be able to nominate a man who shares the same values that I do. Clay Shakesnyder, a man of integrity, a man of loyalty, and a vowed conservative Republican. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. I nominate Clay Shakesnyder for Speaker of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bishop. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? If not, Representative Hodges, why do you rise?
Mr. Acting Speaker, I move that the nominations for the office of Speaker of the House be closed.
Any objections? So ordered. There being 2 nominees for the office of Speaker, the election will be by voice roll call. As the clerk calls the roll, please answer the roll with your choice for election of Speaker. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Acting Speaker Robbie Carter.
Shakesnyder.
Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Adams. Votes Shakesnyder. Ms. Amity. Votes Mack. Mr. Tony Bacala. Votes Mack. Mr. Reggie Bagala. Votes Mack. Mr. Bagley. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Boyer. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Bishop. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Boriak. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Brass. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Brown. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Bryant. Votes Shakesnyder. Ms. Butler. Votes Mack. Ms. Carpenter. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Carrier. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Gary Carter. Mr. Wilford Carter. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Cormier. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Couson. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Cox. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Cruz. Votes Mack. Ms. Davis. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Desatel. Votes Mack. Mr. DeVilliers. Votes Mack. Ms. Dupoisson. Votes Mack. Mr. Duplessis. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Dwight. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Eccles. Votes Mack. Mr. Edmonds. Votes Mack. Ms. Edmonston. Votes Mack. Ms. Emerson. Votes Mack. Mr. Fordham. Votes Shakesnyder. Mr. Furman. Votes Mack. Mr. Fontenot. Votes Mack. Miss Amy Freeman. Votes Shakesnyder. Ms. Freiberg. Votes Mack. Mr. Larry Freeman. Votes Mac. Mr. Gadberry? Votes Mac. Mr. Gaines? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Garofalo? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Glover? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Gudo? Votes Mac. Mr. Green? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Lance Harris? Votes Mac. Mr. Henry? Votes Mac. Ms. Hilferty? Votes Schexnayder. Ms. Hodges? Votes Mac. Mr. Hollis? Votes Mac. Ms. Horton? Votes Mac. Mr. Hughes? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Huval? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Ilg? Votes Mac. Mr. Ivy? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. James? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Jefferson? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Jenkins? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Mike Johnson? Votes Mac. Mr. Travis Johnson? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Jones? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Jordan? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Kerner? Votes Mac. Mr. Lacombe? Votes Schexnayder. Ms. Landry? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Larvadane? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Lyons? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Mack? Votes Mack. Mr. McGee? Votes Schexnayder. Ms. Marcel? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Marino? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. McCormick? Votes Mack. Mr. McFarland? Votes Mack. Mr. McKnight? Votes Mack. Mr. McMahon, sorry. Schexnayder. Mr. Miguez? Votes Mack. Mr. Dustin Miller? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Greg Miller? Schexnayder. Mr. Mincy? Schexnayder. Ms. Moore? Schexnayder. Mr. Muscarello? Mack. Mr. Nelson? Votes Mack. Ms. Newell? Schexnayder. Mr. Chuck Owen? Mack. Mr. Robert Owen? Mack. Ms. Phelps? Schexnayder. Mr. Pierre? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Presley? Votes Mack. Mr. Reiser? Votes Mack. Mr. Romero? Votes Mack. Mr. Shammerhorn? Votes Mack. Mr. Schexnayder? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Seabaugh? Votes Mack. Mr. Selders? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. St. Blanc? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Stagney? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Stefanski? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Tarver? Votes Mack. Ms. Thomas? Votes Mack. Mr. Thompson? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Turner? Schexnayder? Votes Schexnayder. Ms. Villio? Votes Mack. Mr. Wheat? Votes Mack. Ms. White? Schexnayder. Mr. Willard? Votes Schexnayder. Mr. Wright? Votes Mack. Mr. Zarang? Votes Schexnayder.
1 minute while we tabulate. How about Representative Miller? He's right, man. Just a moment. By a vote of 60 for Schexnayder and 45 for Mack, Representative Schexnayder is elected Speaker. All right. Representative Stagny and Representative Miller, would you escort Mr. and Ms. Schexnayder to the podium?
Hold on.
Go see. Ms. Schexnayder, come on down too. Just before he begins his speech, let me take 1 second of personal privilege to thank my wife who's here with me today. As y'all know, without her, I wouldn't have had a kidney last year, so I always want to thank my wife. The oath of office will be administered to Representative Schexnayder by Judge Verdigetz.
I, Clay Schexnayder,
I, Clay Schexnayder,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and the laws of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
and the laws of the great state of Louisiana,
and the laws of the great state of Louisiana,
and I will faithfully and impartially
and I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform
discharge and perform
all the duties incumbent upon me
all the duties incumbent upon me
as Speaker of the House of Representatives
as the Speaker of the House of Representatives
according to the best of my ability
according to the best of my ability
and understanding,
and understanding.
so help me God.
So help me God.
At this time, Representative Schexnayder is granted personal privilege. Representative Schexnayder.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. First of all, I want to thank God. I think all of us understand that He has a plan for each and every one of us to be able to successfully do the things that we want to do. Second of all, I want to thank my family and all of my friends and all of my colleagues here. Stuart Bishop, thank you, my brother. As we begin a decade today, we sent out a strong message to the people of Louisiana. Their House is fiercely independent body that has committed to doing one thing and one thing only: creating a better life for every Louisiana citizen. I am proud and humbled to be the one who will guide us with you, this body, over the next 4 years. And today represents a time for all of us to begin our work together. I know we don't always agree about policy. We don't always agree about politics, but we will all agree that Louisiana has the best days ahead of it. People over special interests, keeping this rails clean of people from special interests and diversions, and dividing us in Washington-style politics and rhetoric. Keeping those things out of this chamber is very important. As we move forward, we can never forget that we must do what the people of Louisiana are asking us to do: balance our budget, lower spending, protect their values, better education, and create opportunities for our children and grandchildren. This is our legacy. Moving Louisiana forward will take every one of us. It will take representatives who represent the timber industry in their district, representatives who see oil and gas as a lifeblood of jobs for their constituents, representatives who have ag in their driving force to create more jobs. As a representative who has our proud universities in their backyards, we must represent all of them. I challenge us to think big, to put ideas that will positively change the course of our state's history. This is our time. This is our opportunity. This is our moment to restore the faith in the people of this state. We will show them that 105 people, men and women, from different backgrounds, from different parties, and different parts of this state can be trusted to stand together against outside influences, stand for a prosperous Louisiana, for our families, and for generations to come. I'd like to thank all of you. God bless all of you. God bless the House of Representatives. God bless America. And go Tigers.